So good afternoon and welcome all. This is the first meeting of the reading glass. So there the glass is very important. Your glass needs to be accurate to see the meaning in between the lines. So that is the metaphor which is meant. The reading glass is supposed to bring to us various papers in the fields, the domains of the two projects, covering various features of it, and then raise issues and questions related to that. So this would give us not only acquaintance with the work which is going on in the field, but also will help us as a team to ask questions from very different angles. And in the process, we also learn without doing much work, because there's already one person who would have done quite a bit of work and presenting to you. But then the only caveat is that we all are going to be a presenter one day or the other in this series, so we all will have to read and present. So today, the first presentation in the reading class is by Meera Kumar Menon. She is going to present to us a very interesting paper. I hope you all downloaded the paper and read it, because that's what you're supposed to do. And she's going to also give her own comments into the paper. So I also want to thank Meera for taking the first slot for this reading class and leading us to further meetings of this series, which I'm sure will be very fascinating in the coming fortnights and coming months. So Meera.
So good evening everybody. Today I'll be presenting on a very fascinating topic, I'm sure, which is mantra and magic. And I will be putting it in a framework which, as a literary student, I specifically enjoy, which is that of language. So before we begin, could I request you all to do a very small mental exercise. So I would want all of you to say one word, could be any word, table, chair, a name, anything. Just say it out loud.
Meera.
So, okay. Vanessa.
I.
Amrita.
You.
Okay. Now for the next 30 seconds, quickly, can you all close your eyes and meditate or chant the same word? You could just chant it in your mind, or you could chant it aloud. If you don't want to disturb, you can just chant it within your mind. Just keep repeating the same word for, say, 30 seconds. You can use different intonations in your mind, different tones. Just keep saying the same word. Great, thank you. We'll get back to this exercise in the course of my presentation. So, another quick question. What do you understand by mantra? What comes to your mind when you hear mantra? Anybody? Okay. Anybody else?
Formula.
Okay. Okay. Alright, so let's begin by the question of what is mantra and try to understand it better in the course of the presentation. So today, to understand this concept of mantra more clearly and where one can place it between the boundaries of language, I am using this one text, The Magical Language of Mantra by Patton E. Burchett. It is published in the Journal of American Academy of Religion. So the paper looks at three things. One is the nature and function of Hindu mantras. The other is why mantras should not be considered a form of magic. And third, it illustrates the limitations of scientific and rational perspective. So, like Satish said, sometimes when we think of what mantra is, we come to the idea that it is a formula, it is some sort of a spell. You gave an example of it. So, mantra is usually understood by the West as a formula or a spell or something of that kind. And they say that there is a power or some sort of a magic in words. What is this magic? What gives efficacy to words? What is the effect of words in mantra? So it is understood that the mantras assume the power of a deity that they incorporate. So if you are invoking a god, say Saraswati or Lakshmi or whoever the mantra is chanted for, it is assumed that it is the power of the deity that is assumed into the mantra. So now, how do we distinguish between magic and religion? By magic, I don't mean the magical shows that we see, but magic in terms of ritual and magic in terms of occult practices and so forth, and mantra largely. So we are looking at what is the difference between magic and religion. So magic, when we think about it, we usually associate it to a heterodox system, and we consider it as, it is immoral, it is illicit. So generally when you say dark magic, you tend to think that it is something private, it is about controlling the nature and things like that, right? And there is also some amount of coercion that comes into place. Whereas when you say religion, you are more sympathetic towards religion. Your understanding of religion is also more sympathetic. You think of it as a public discourse, something that is community focused, something that has a social service orientation, something that transcends, and also something that is about invocation and supplication, and you tend to use softer words when you talk about religion as opposed to when you talk about magic. So where is it that the boundaries of magic and religion blur? So when you use the term magic, you generally tend to condemn and marginalize some things. So if you don't understand something, you generally tend to think of it as magic, because we don't get it, so it must be magic. We cannot have a scientific explanation for it, so it must be magic. So who are these accusers? Who would say that one ritual is magic and the other belongs to religion? Who is in a position of authority to say that this is magic and this is religion? These are questions we could ask. So now, the power of words. Cassier, who's a scholar, talks about magical belief. Okay? He says that magical belief necessarily understands that word and name do not designate and signify like it does in language, but they are and they act. So I'll go more deeper into this. But then it is understood that magic generally means that it contains an object and its real powers inside the mantra. So this is the basic of magical understanding according to him, and he says that the shadow realm of words, images, signs and all of that are pretty useless. So, and then we have Malinowski, who says that this power of magic that we believe in is actually a delusional belief in the potency of words. You know, that we believe that when you repeat something, it produces reality. What kind of delusion is that, right? So then we have Brain Vickers, who's another scholar, who gives us a classification of the disjunctive and the conjunctive. Disjunctive basically means something that has to do with science and modern rational thinking, and then we have conjunctive, which has more to do with magic. So in disjunctive, we have a clear distinction. In modern rational thinking, we have a clear distinction between what is a word and what is a thing, what is metaphor and what is literal. But when it comes to magic, these kind of ideas tend to blur. So then there is a scholarly disavowal, wherein when you think about scientific rational thinking, there is a clear and impermeable difference or a boundary between nature and culture. It is difficult to meet a common ground between the two, because it's very distinct per se. And then we also understand the natural world and the human causality as different from a transitory world, which is the realm of language and desire and things like that. So language is often understood as a passive representation of the nature that we live in. Now, we have another set of scholars who are my personal favorites, like people like J.L. Austin, who talks about speech acts and performative utterances. So what are these speech acts? When you speak, they become an action. Let me give you an example. So these are words that constitute action. Think about a marriage ceremony, a church marriage ceremony. So there, the vicar would say that now I pronounce you man and wife. Or when it is a christening ceremony. See, there the word actually becomes an action. how does this happen? So then we have somebody called Stanley Tambaya, who also tries to rationalize the idea of a magical language to fit it into a framework. And he says that even if something is unintelligible, doesn't mean that it is nonsensical. See, maybe you do not understand what it means. That does not mean that it is nonsensical. As long as it has a purpose, it could be sensible. So if you don't understand a mantra that I chant, but then I have a purpose of using it, then maybe it is not nonsensical. So now what is a mantra? So there are different concepts of what a mantra is. Very literally translated, manana is to think and tra is basically an instrument. So mantra would mean an instrumentality of thought. There are also other ways of looking at it. For instance, mananat trayate iti mantra, that which protects when you speak is also mantra. So and there are other interpretations which says that mantra would mean a liberation for man. So there are three types of mantra which the paper specifically talks about, which is the Vedic, Tantric and invented. Unfortunately, there is hardly any discussion about what is invented mantra. So my question which arose when I read it was, is there a invented mantra and an uninvented one? Like, where did the uninvented one even come from? And who invents the ones that are invented, right? So and the author says that the effective power of these mantras are always derived from God, whether those are invented or Vedic or Tantric or whatever classification they falls into. So now we have Andre Perdo, who says that mantra is a sound or a word. It's never written, okay? So it is sound as in shabda or word, which is vak. And to understand the mantra, you have to have a calm mind, you have to be concentrating on it, and it is usually imparted by a guru. It is very secretive, and sometimes it also has to be suitable to you. So you cannot randomly pick up a mantra and say that, okay, this is supposed to give you so and so benefits. No, you have to find a mantra which is suitable for you. And then it also leads to redemption at some point. And also, according to Pado's understanding of it, it is a union of the practitioner's consciousness with the divine consciousness. So, Mantra Mahodadi is a text. Mantra Mahodadi basically means a great ocean of mantras. There, they speak about 6 acts, the Shodasha Kriyas, which are Shanti, Vashya, Stamba, Dvesha, Uchchada and Marana. So, these are curing, subjugation, immobilization, enmity, eradication and liquidation. These are the 6 practices that one can do through mantras. But then even in Mantra Mahodadi they say that all of these practices are very private and desire oriented. So if you want to cause something, if you want to influence somebody in some way, then you do this. So it's basically a matter of desire. However, it is better if you strive for a spiritual liberation through mantras. That is the idea that Mantra Mahodadi eventually comes to. So except for the Abhijara traditions, almost all mantras are socially accepted. So then also a single mantra could actually fall under the category of religious or magical, right? So then the problem is, how will we classify something as religious and magical when all these boundaries are blurring and merging, right? And according to what dominant social authority do we understand something as religious or magical? So from there we also have a classification of Vedic mantras and Tantric mantras. Like I said, there is hardly any discourse about the invented ones. So what is the difference between a Vedic mantra and a Tantric mantra? Now Vedic mantra is a correspondence between divine and natural objects, and it is controlled to the benefit of the practitioners. So it's more desire oriented. If you want to do something to somebody, then you go for the Vedic mantras, alright? And then there is the idea of bija, a seed, and bandhu, a link between the world and divine. And then the Vedic mantra is actually understood as a means to an end. So you have a goal and this Vedic mantra will help you to reach there. On the other hand, a Tantric mantra is a single mantra, and it is and you have to repeat it with good concentration, and they become the objects they represent. So that is a bit of a confusing idea, but then we'll deal with it more. And it is understood as a means and an end. So it is at the same time the means and the end, right? So now we'll look at some of the interpretations of mantra. What are the different ways in which mantra has been interpreted so far? Alright. So the first interpretation is that Bija mantra is about the semanticization and sublimation of sexual fluids in Tantra. So the idea is that a discussion about the sexual intercourse, and not just that, also the larger idea of the cosmic processes, is encompassed or encapsulated into the Bija mantra. So the Bija, which is the sexual seed, is actually encapsulated into the Bija mantra, which is the root mantra. Okay. So this is one interpretation of it. And so the interpreter says that this would actually facilitate a discussion in very abstract and asexual terms about something that is very sexual. And I feel that it is a very reductionist argument, which the author also agrees with. Now another way of looking at this is through Rigveda, wherein Vak is considered as a female creative principle. So the words used in mantra, which is Vak, is understood as a female creative principle. So it is also called as a sovereign queen, and Vaka is understood as a consort of Prajapati, and in their union the universe is created. That's the first picture.
Sorry, Prajapati and?
Prajapati and Shakti. So now we have the grammarian school with people like Bhartrhari, the very famous 5th century philosopher and grammarian. So he understands mantras as a diverse manifestation of the unitary Brahman. Now the unitary Brahman is one single whole, and mantras are understood as the diverse manifestations of that whole. So according to him, the whole universe proceeds in the form of sound, shabda, and objects denoted by these sounds, which is the artha. Now according to him, language and consciousness is very inextricably linked, right, and therefore they are almost synonymous in that sense. Now the problem here is mantras are understood as a crude form of Vak, okay, the divine word. So there we can actually kind of find a paradox. That is, at the same time a mantra is equal to the supreme word, at the same time it is also not equal to the supreme word. So what does this mean? Now Bhartrhari has an explanation of the unfolding of the word and the world in extension. And how he does this is, imagine a big triangle or some sort of a hierarchy, and at the top of it he has Paravak, which is the divine word. After that you have Pashyanti. Now Pashyanti is the desire to see, and I would like you to think of a seed there. See, a seed has a potential to become a tree, right? So Pashyanti is the stage where the seed has the potential to become a tree just before sprouting. And then we have the intermediate stage, which is Madhyama. So the seed has sprouted, there is a sapling coming out, and there is a seed. So they are different but not entirely different. And in the end, at the very lowest level, we have Vaikari, which is very corporeal, which has objects and sounds, which is very specific. So if we were to think about our languages as we understand it today, I would think that we are still in the very formal stage. We have never gone across it. So now we'll talk about the manifestation of the divine in language, mantra as language. So when I said about all this, about how there is a seed and a tree all inside and encompassing each other and all that, we understand that the manifestation of divine in language at the same time reveals and hides. So you can actually understand whatever secrets you have to within the mantra. At the same time it also hides whatever it wants to reveal. So in conventional language, that is the usual understanding of our language, language actually disguises, fragments, and creates a condition of error, in the sense that, see, when we had discussions about transcendental experiences and all that, remember how limiting our words were and how difficult we found to express whatever we wanted to say. So language actually at the same time disguises and fragments and limits and creates a condition of error. But mantra, on the other hand, apparently transcends original language. So is there something that is beyond language? We need to think about it. So Abhinava Gupta, I'm sure sir would know more about it. Abhinava Gupta says that mantra harnesses the coagulated vibration of the individual consciousness until it reaches the frequency of the Shiva consciousness. So we are under the impression that there is something called a Shiva consciousness, which is very similar to the idea of the Shabda Brahman and the unitary Brahman and all that, and that it is your consciousness reaching the stage of Shiva consciousness via the use of mantra. Now we also understand mantra as uchara. By uchara I don't mean pronunciation. It is about the fusion of a cosmic phonic energy within yourself. So remember when you were actually keeping your eyes closed and chanting whatever word you thought about. So here there is apparently, when you chant a mantra, an energy transfusion where the energy of your breath and the phonic energy kind of fuses. So chanting apparently awakes the Kundalini serpent, and then ultimately it helps you reach a pure consciousness. Now what is Kundalini serpent and all that? You could actually understand it in terms of the chakras in your body system, or you can actually think of it as some sort of an energy that emanates within yourself. So now Wheelock, on the other hand, says that mantra moves away from a constraining language, like we were saying before, and it does not point to a referent that is outside in the objective world, but mantra interestingly points inside within itself. It's some sort of a meta language is my understanding of it, wherein mantra actually talks about the source of language, the creation itself. Now we'll look at the understandings about how mantra is not a language, right? So in languages generally we have an inner organization and a phonetic structure and all that, which makes it a language. On the other hand, we have all of that, plus we have a focus on meaning. Language generally associate words with meaning, right? Mantra, on the other hand, focuses on the organization it has and on its phonetic structure. So that way, some scholars argue that it is not necessarily a language. Now another feature of mantra is that it actually exerts a hypnotic influence in you. How does this happen? So while it exerts that hypnotic influence, it's actually breaking away from the tyranny of language, from that limited experiences that language can actually provide you. And in that endeavor, it also apparently returns to a biological domain, which is your body. Also, another feature of mantra is musicality. So you continuously repeat some words, right? And there is a defamiliarization process that happens when you continuously repeat words, which is what I wanted to bring your attention to when you repeated it. What experience did you go through? It is see, even when you do research, if you were to look at a particular thing more closely, you have a different understanding of it. You are actually breaking down your concepts, which you began with, and then you are looking at it more closely to frame another understanding of it. And in that process, you are defamiliarizing yourself. So similarly, mantra also is a process of continuous repetition, which results in defamiliarization. And how does that help? So when you destruct a specific condition, it also gives you further experiences. Now moving more into language, Yeller is another scholar who talks about poetic devices. Now there are poetic devices like alliteration, repetition, use of synonyms and all of this in mantrocharana. So if I were to look at, say, a mantra from Veda Pushpa, for instance, Mantra Pushpa for instance, there are specific ways in which you chant. So for in Mantra Pushpa for instance, it's like Yopam pushpam veda pushpavan prajavan pashuman bhavati. So if you say it, it's just Yopam pushpam veda. But when you chant it, it's different. There is an intonation, there is a pitch, there is a way in which you use it, all of that, right? So now mantra is also understood as a mimetic diagram. What does this mean? So Yeller points out that mantra actually is a mimesis, is a mimicking of the cosmic processes that we are a part of, which is the sexual union, which is the breathing cycles that we have, which are the acts of speech. So all of this are mimicked in mantra. And in that sense, there is an appearance of a natural connection between language and mantra. Remember, we are talking about language and mantra? So yeah, so there is an appearance of natural connection. So when you say it is an appearance, you mean that it is not real, right? So he says it creates a dream of natural language. So it's not a real language, it's a dream of a natural language. Now, if you were to look at the Western and Indian understandings of mantra, I would like to term it epistemic violence, which I would justify in a while. So what is the Western understanding of mantra? They say that mantra uses musical sounds, rhythms and all of that, and in that sense it transcends the constraints of our usual language or ordinary language, and therefore creates an illusion of natural language. So the Western perspective of it is not ready to say that mantra is a language per se. On the other hand, we have our traditional Indian understanding which says that mantras transcend. Definitely, we agree with the West with that. But then, in that linguistic movement, it illuminates the ultimate freedom, the creative energy and the pure consciousness. And therefore, it is the natural language. Okay? So now what is the problem? Why are we problematizing whether it is a language, whether it is not a language, who cares, right? So what is the problem with all of this? So when you say magic, there is a negative connotation that you give to the processes, right? So when you understand something as magic, especially when the West understood our practices as magic and ritual, what happened was, it actually gave it a connotation of a false religion, of something irrational. Now, how this all came about was, in Europe, during the Protestants' time, during Reformation and Enlightenment and things like that, they needed a coherent doctrine which would help them to justify religion to a nation, to a worldview which supported science. So how did they justify religion to science? They said that it is a rational belief in God. Now that is a problematic understanding of religion, but then that is how they went about it. And the West, when it approached the Eastern religions, especially our Indian ones, they said that they could actually agree with, say, the Indian idea of bhakti, which is very close to the idea of prayers in Christianity, say. So because that is still closer to, you're just praying to God, there is one God, it is more understandable as opposed to the many ritual practices that they could actually make no sense of. So Tantric mantra, however, neither coerces nor pleads. We are not pleading to a God, we are not coercing the God to come and help us. It is actually accessing the power of the divine, which is inherently present within the mantra. And the distinction between human, language, divine and all that never existed in the Tantric tradition. So now, we are saying that we are categorizing it as magic. What is the problem? What is at stake when we categorize something as magic? So when we say that something is magic, there is actually a marginalization and a condemnation of what we understand as the other. And there is a value judgment associated with it. Now, is this the core problem? What is the core problem here? The problem here is that we don't believe in tradition, first of all, and we understand tradition in opposition to science. So what happens then? Science actually separates material causality from subjectivity and desire, which is entirely in another realm. So if you look at Cartesian epistemology, it drains the object of its culture. On the other hand, it also drains the subject of its nature. I'm sure there will be arguments on it probably, but yeah. So mantra in this sense is an interconnection between the man and universe, the subject and the object, and it is a mimetic yielding into the other. Now Glucklich says that magical, by magical he means, this is a definition I thought was interesting. By magical is meant a recognition based on sensory perception, right? It is performed symbolically, that life is constituted by interrelated phenomena that are both meaningful and controllable when properly understood. So what science generally does is it bestows meaning on meaningless objects. So unless you bestow a meaning on something, it does not have a meaning. There is that kind of an understanding. See, very fascinatingly, yesterday I was listening to a lecture wherein Dr. Pani was saying about our understanding of knowledge systems. So he gave the example of the serpent and the rope. In the West, your understanding of the serpent and the rope, the difference between the serpent and the rope, begins when you say that this is the serpent and that is the rope. So you have to distinguish between the two. But in an Indian system, on the other hand, even if you consider the rope to be a serpent, your understanding begins with the very minute you understand it or confuse it for a serpent. Even that is an experiential knowledge. Even that becomes a part of your experiential knowledge. So yeah, what or how does magic help, or understanding a mantra help? See, on the one hand, we can say that magic is wrong, it is unbelievable, it is difficult to be proved by logic and rationality. But on the other hand, it is this same weakness which actually becomes a greatness also of mantra, in the sense that it actually provides a vitally necessary alternative, and it illuminates the other dimension of reality which science is blind to. So in the paper, the author concludes by saying that one should avoid scholarly terms. When you say that mantra is magic, or mantra is language, or mantra is religion, you are generally actually classifying it. And this sort of a classification is very limiting. And social sciences in this way criticizes itself. How does it criticize itself? When the West says that, you know, this is ritual or this is magic, what happens is it is using these old concepts to destroy the machinery itself. So when they say that we don't understand you, and this is just, they actually don't even say we don't understand you, they say that this is magic, this is beyond rationality. And in that process, they actually deconstruct the machinery in which it is embedded. So this idea of Western science to deauthorize that which is not non-Western, we should try and look beyond it maybe. Because it is high time that we have post-colonial studies, we have post-colonial studies as well. So maybe at least at this point we could actually look at something that is beyond rational, give a little more importance to that which is not exactly logical, because why not? And well, when I read the paper, I also thought about something called folk mantras. When I told you that there is hardly any discussion about invented mantras, I was actually interested in something called folk mantras. So what are these folk mantras? I will be in my research dealing with some mantras that are prevalent in Kerala, which they use. So I'll just give you an example, so maybe at least the Malayalis would get to hear an example of what the folk mantra is. So this is one of the folk mantras used, which goes, Om Brahmanan apaniyate Vishnuvan apaniyate enne kanda paniyam talakuttum Surya devanana pari paranna pandirugadam vaipoga swaha. Okay, so it basically means this is a very rough translation, which means that my fever should run away somewhere. Okay, so yeah, that is one thing. So are these folk mantras, if I may use the term, doubly colonized? In one sense, mantras themselves are colonized. In another, are our folk mantras, are our indigenous mantras, which are in opposition to, say, the Vedic or Tantric mantras, in a doubly colonized position, is something that I thought about. Another thing is, when we think of mantra as mimesis, it is a performance tradition of sorts. Does it then actually, form a practice of catharsis? In psychology, we say that when you are actually understanding a performance, the performance has an effect on you as well. So in that sense, can I explain mantra as a speech act? Is another question that I had. Now the spirit of research, I would say, is to look closer, to defamiliarize, like we did when we thought about mantra, right? We are actually listening to a word a couple of times. We are understanding it in different versions. And to break boundaries. So when we ask questions, see, in the realm of science, we are almost sure that we will get an answer. And if at all we don't get an answer, we generally say that the science has not developed so much. But then there is a definitive understanding. There is a definitive understanding that there will be an answer at some point or another, right? But when you get out of the realm of science and ask these questions, it is rather unsettling. How do you ask these questions? But then, I think the spirit of true research should actually be about asking unsettling questions, which you're not sure you will get answers for, but you still ask them anyway. So with that, I conclude by invoking a sloka which is also my favorite and is quoted by Kalidasa in Raghuvamsha, which says, Vagartha viva sampraktau vagartha pratipattaye jagadapidarau vande Parvati Parameshwarau, which means I seek the blessings of God Parvati and Parameshwara, who are unified as meaning, as word and meaning, and in that endeavor I seek their blessings to understand word and meaning. Thank you.